Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be chatting through my best books of 2022. My favourites, the highlights of the year, my top 5 out of the 86, 87 books that I read in 2022. I actually struggled to put together a best books list. I was, doing my normal top 10, but actually I've only got a top 5. I think 2022 was a year of good books. It was a year of good books, but I don't think I had loads of 5 stars. I'm obsessed. I love this. I adore this. That I read quite a few 4 stars. That there was a lot of good. There was a lot of good, but I'm not here to talk about the good. I'm here to talk about the amazing, to talk about my favourites. And I didn't actually have that many of them, which is really disappointing. So I'm really hoping that I can channel the energy of the better book in the best book, the favourite book in 2023, and that I will find more favourites. Well, and also quite a few of the favourites that I did have were parts of series. So I don't feel like it's right of me to create a list where there's three books all in the same series, because that does not make any sense. I'll just recommend my favourite of the series, and that will tell you to read the series. So we're going to work up to the best book, to the favourite, from 5 to 1. If you want to put any predictions for what these 5 will be, then here is your chance to do so. So coming in at number 5, we have the Licanius Trilogy by James Islington. This, I'm just showing up the first book, The Shadow of What Was Lost. So I read this whole trilogy this past year, and I read them at the beginning of the year, so between January and March I think I read these books, pretty much back to back, and I really enjoyed this epic fantasy series. It is a multiple perspective series, and we're set in this world where 20 years prior there has been an event that meant that magic users are now repressed, and we're following a group of magic users in a school setting where they are being trained in their magic. So previously magic users ruled the world, now they don't. There is also this greater force from beyond the wall, and we know that there is this evil that is rising beyond this wall. And our main characters at the beginning of the book are sort of are tasked with protecting the world and going off on this expedition. And I really liked the magic system in this, the way that the magic worked, and I also really liked our characters as well, that there are multiple perspectives that we are following, and I also really liked the intricacies of the plot, that this is a very detailedly plotted series. There is a lot to get your head around and a lot to keep track of, both in terms of the characters, in terms of their names, in terms of the history of the world, in terms of the lore, in terms of the twists and the turns that everything goes through. It is these twists, it is these turns that kept me hooked and kept me reading. That this series was constantly surprising me with where it was going. That suddenly these reveals would come about and I'll be like, wow, I was not expecting that. I did not see that coming. Okay, got to get my head around this whole new lore now, and this whole new perspective. I like the different settings that we go through in this world. That we have the school setting, we have a city, and the sort of the politics and the royalty within the city. We have this other place, which is this completely desolate, barren city that is uninhabited, and this wall that blocks the north and what is beyond this wall. I really like the way that this sort of took the ideas of good and evil, what's good, what's evil, where our characters fall on this spectrum. I would really recommend this trilogy if you are after some epic fantasy, and exploring a very intricately detailed world. I would recommend, if you are going into this, to read the books back to back, or relatively back to back, because there are a lot of details, and although there are summaries in the second and third book of the previous books, there is a lot to get your head around and a lot to remember. So for me, I found it was better to read these in closer succession. I do have a video review up of this series if you're interested in watching that, but I would definitely recommend this one. Next, at number 4, we have The Hunger of the Gods by John Gwynne. I don't think anybody's really surprised. I have read everything that John Gwynne has written. I have loved pretty much everything that John Gwynne has written. And this is the sequel to The Shadow of the Gods, which came out in 2021. And this is the continuation to that story, following the characters and the tribulations that they go through. So The Shadow of the Gods, you are following 3 main perspectives in this very Norse-inspired world where the dead gods are rising. In that, we are following Orca, who is a mother figure who, following some events, ends up on a, well, not quite a quest, but a journey. And then also Elokar, who is from a more wealthy family, and the warband that she is in, and also Varg, who is an ex-slave, and the warband as well that he falls into, so separate warbands there. I really like the world. It is a very dark, gritty, grim world that I would die in instantly. I would be dead very, very early on. But I really enjoyed this sequel. I enjoyed the incorporation of some of the more villainous perspectives that we get in this, as well as seeing what's happening with the cast of characters that we met in book one, and seeing the journeys that they're going on here. There is a lot of journeying in this book, so maybe if you don't like journeying, you won't like this, but I don't mind journeying. I like seeing all their journeys. I like seeing where they were going. This follows on directly from the end of that first book, and I was straight back into this. John Green as well, he gave me a little summary of book one, which I found really helpful, and that settled me back into this world. So I was really straight back into this, really settled and enjoying where we were going with these characters. I do really like the way that John Gwynne builds to his endings. I think his endings are really, really strong. So where we got to at the end of this book, I am nervous for what's going to happen to all our characters. I'm scared for them. And I always do get scared with John Gwynne's characters, because from reading his books, he's not scared to kill off his characters. And I'm like, people are dying. People are going to die. I don't want people to die. Like, I've grown attached to you as characters. So I am really excited to read the third book in this series, because John Gwynne, his conclusions so far, the ones that I've read, so Wrath and A Time of Courage, they're those conclusions which are so satisfying, in that I am happy for our characters, I am sad for our characters, I'm probably crying, I'm probably hugging the book, trying to emotionally recover from the conclusion of these stories. And that is the feelings that I get reading these books. And so that's why I read, like, that those intense emotions that I can get to when reading and exploring these worlds and these characters. And John Gwynne definitely evokes those strong emotions from me. So I really thoroughly enjoyed this. Not surprised at all, and would definitely recommend John Gwynne as an author, and as well this series. One of my other favourites from this year was Babel by R.F. Kuang. This is a standalone dark academia book set in Oxford, following a main character, Robin, who is originally from Chinese descent, and he is brought over to England by a wealthy British man and trained in the act of languages. And in this world, translation and languages is what fuel the magic. And it's set in sort of the 1900s, I believe. And you're following these cast of characters at Oxford as they come to understand magic and understand how it's created. But as well as that, it is a very thematic book looking at colonisation and the erasure that the British did to other nationalities and to other languages as they expanded and tried to bring them into the British Empire, and the way that academia and the institutions around academia can really look down on people of different nationalities, and the power dynamics within academia. So I really liked this. I'd say this book is a book of two halves, that the first half is quite slow as we get used to this world, to the characters, to the academia, and the way that the magic systems works with language, and then it becomes a lot more action-packed in the second half. I think I actually really preferred that first half. When I was a student of languages, and so I find the languages side of this really, really interesting, because I love learning about the etymology of languages, or the etymology behind different words, and understanding like where words come from, and knowing that this word has a root within Latin, this one has a Germanic root, this one has a root in this language, and understanding like how the words became what they are today, and what is lost between translations. And as someone that speaks multiple languages, knowing that there are some words that work so well in another language that just do not work in English. Like, there are words that I know in French that I'm like, that is such a great word, but there is no English translation, that whatever you translate it to is going to be lost. And having that bit that's lost is fueling the magic system. I found that really interesting. I think that if you are not such a language nerd, then maybe you would find that bit of the book drier, but I was hooked. and I was really enjoying that slow build, so much so that when we did get into all of the plot and the action, I was like, oh, can we go back to some of those like lessons in the classroom, because I was really enjoying those lessons in the classroom. But I did still really enjoy where we got to with this, and seeing the ending and where it all came to in the end. I know that I am not normally so much of a thematic reader, that I read more for the characters, for the worlds. Probably, yeah, characters, world building are what I read mostly for, then it's plot, and then it's themes. But I did really enjoy the themes. Well, I don't enjoy colonisation, but I did enjoy the way that R.F. Kuang brought these themes into this story and entwined them within the plot. So I would strongly recommend this if you're after a dark academia style book. I was nervous going into this as someone from Oxford, and with this being set in Oxford and in London, and I do think that it was done well. I know that R.F. Kuang has studied in Oxford and has spent quite a bit of time over here, and I do think she did the setting well. There was an instance with the bookshop in London that she talked about. She gave it the wrong location. She said it was opposite another location, and I said, and I know that they're next door. Very minor, very, very minor. I could overlook it. And she did also say about how much it rains here, and it does rain here, but can we just, it doesn't rain like the way that it was going on about in this book. Like, it hasn't rained here all week. So, and it's in the middle of winter. Like, it doesn't rain here 99% of the time. Okay, it doesn't. Okay, into the top two. And I feel as though these two sort of like go backwards and forwards a little bit with my like number one and number two, that they keep going around depending on how I feel on the day. Today though, we've decided that this one is number two, and that is Daughter of the Forest by Juliette Marillier. So I read the Seven Waters trilogy this year, and I think Daughter of the Forest was my favourite of the trilogy. This book, we are following her main character, Saoirse, and at the beginning of the book, her 6 brothers are cursed into turning into swans, and we follow her as she tries to break this curse and allow her brothers to return to being human. And I love the setting of this in Ireland during the medieval times, and the way that this story was all set up. So a lot of the first 100 or so pages of this are exposition, that we get to know this world, we get to know these characters, we get to know the different relationship dynamics, we get to understand the lore and the sort of the magical influences within this world. And it was a lot of setup, and it was a little bit slow to begin with, but I really liked that. I really liked getting a real grounding in this world. And then we moved into the plot, and Saoirse trying to break this curse on her brothers and her family. And I really liked like the relationships. I really felt for Saoirse. I was so invested in her and her place within this world, and the relationships that she was creating within this world, and the romance within this, the family relationships, the friends that she met along the way. I was so invested in this. I could not put it down. I was so invested in this. I think it was so well written, really, really well written. And I think for me, it is really important for me to know a world, to understand a world and our characters' positions within it, to be able to enjoy a book, to be able to rate a book highly. And this book delivered that, because this book made this world feel real, that I really believed in this world. I do think this one was the strongest in the trilogy. The next 2 books are following subsequent generations, so they're different characters within the same family. But this one has a really special place. This one has a really special place in my heart, because I loved these characters. I loved Saoirse, and it was these characters that really, really spoke to me, I would say. And it had this fairy tale-like atmosphere, so I felt as though everything was going to end up okay in the end. But it gets so dark and so brutal for Saoirse. It's become so hard for her that I started to question whether it was going to end up okay in the end, because she goes through so much. She goes through so much. I will say trigger warnings for sexual assault in this. So if you are sensitive to that, then it is on page. And then the top book, the best book, my favourite of 2022 goes to The Wall of Storms by Ken Liu. So Ken Liu is at the top, and I think this is why I've gone and put him on the top, at the top of the pile, the best of the best, because I have read 5 of his books this year. 5 of his books. So I read all of the Dandelion Dynasty, and I read The Paper Menagerie, which I also gave 5 stars. The Paper Menagerie was the first book I read in 2022, and I loved that. That's his short story collection. I then read The Grace of Kings in March, and I wasn't a massive fan. Like, I liked it. I think I gave it 3.5 stars, but I was a little bit disappointed in it because I was like, oh, this reads very historical. This reads very much like a preface or a history textbook to this world in some ways. That it was a prelude to the rest of this Dandelion Dynasty series. Then in June, I read The Wall of Storms, and this book changed my mind on the Dandelion Dynasty. I was hooked. And I think this one is my favourite in the series, but I was also hooked by The Veiled Throne and Speaking Bones. This has been a highlight of my year. This series, this quartet has been a highlight of my 2022. It took over my 2022, and yeah, this is why it's my favourite. So, The Grace of Kings and the Dandelion Dynasty is a historical Chinese-inspired fantasy story. The first book, we are following the setup of this world, this history, as we follow the different warring factions on the island of Dara. So at the beginning of the book, the Emperor is dying, has died, and there are these different factions which are trying to take control of the islands of Dara. And we are seeing these different factions battle over these islands and battle over control, over power, and over maintaining their place in history. And that really sets up for where the rest of this series goes. And I really did like the way that Ken Liu interweaves different themes throughout his books. So we have these gods, these godlike powers that look down upon the earth, and then they comment every now and again on what people are doing. And then also the themes that were explored in his short stories, themes on history and the who tells history, that is it the winners, is it the losers, and culture and education and language, that I really thoroughly enjoyed in this. The second book and the rest of the series after that first one, you have some different perspectives. So it's a different cast of characters that come in, so a different generation, and it becomes a lot more fantasy, I would say. The first book is very much a alternate history on the history of China, whereas now we move away from that and we move into more of a fantasy. And especially like the first half of this book, I would say, is very much political intrigue and political machinations as people are manipulating the different powers within this world. And then the second half becomes a lot more tension-filled and dramatic, and there's a change in pace and plot. I also did really like the way that engineering is interspersed throughout this. Ken Liu, I believe, has coined the term silk punk. You can tell he knows what he's writing about. That I found that the way that he told these battle sequences, where we would go into the battle and then we would jump back to how they have been able to achieve what they are achieving in this battle, how they managed to create the different machines that they have created. I find that really, really interesting, and I'm like, oh, how are you so clever? You were so clever. I think these were very, very well written. Very well paced as well, that I flew through this book. I flew through it. I think the third and fourth book did take me a little bit longer to read, which is why I think the Wall of Storms is my favourite, because I think this one was really special. This one was the special one in the series. And also I think I went in with slightly lower expectations to this one after not loving The Grace of Kings, and then it really surprised me with how much I loved it. So those are my top 5 books of 2022. Let me know if any of these overlap with your favourite books of 2022 or what your favourites of the year were. And thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!